Good afternoon. I'm Lou Alfonso, representing the EAC's Educational Committee.
Bill, your mic,
Welcome to our,
Your mic is, your mic.
Oh,
all right.
all right, let's, hang on, just.
Can you hear me all right?
Wait a minute.
All right.
All right now.
Welcome to our first of 6 series presentations. There's going to be 3 today, as you know, and 3 tomorrow afternoon. I hope you can attend all of them. So let's get started. Our first speaker today is Mark Borckardt. Mark is a native of St. Paul, Minnesota, who spent a good part of his early years in Findlay, Ohio, and is a graduate of Findlay University. He developed a keen interest in numismatics, and in 1980 made this his full-time profession. Okay, thanks, Mark. Okay, got it. Mark began cataloging rare coins for auctions in 1989, and since that time, he has handled 80 of the 100 top United States coins, according to the itemization contained in the 100 Greatest U.S. Coins by Jeff Garrett and Ron Girth. He is a life member of the American Numismatic Association, or early American Coppers, the American Numismatic Society, the Chicago Coin Club, and the Central States Numismatic Society, and the Florida United Numismatists. Mark was nominated and elected to membership in the Rittenhouse Society in 1994. He was the Gill's Clemmy Award recipient in 2016, the ANA Numismatist of the Year in 2020, and is the EAC's Herbert Silverman's Award recipient in 2021. With Heritage Auctions, Mark has cataloged 28 of the firm's million-dollar coins. His numismatic experience includes important discoveries, such as the new early half-dollar variety 1806 O-130, and rediscovery of the missing George L. Walton specimen of the 1913 Liberty nickel. Mark is the co-author of Million Dollar Nickels, telling the story of that important numismatic event. He is the editor of Walter Breen's Encyclopedia of United States Cents, earning the EAC's Literary Award in 2001 and the Gill's Book of the Year Award that same year. He has contributed substantially to many other numismatic reference works. In addition, Mark has penned many articles for the Numismatist, Pennywise, and other numismatic publications, which I'm sure many of you know as you go through those publications. Mark has further contributed substantially to countless numismatic auction catalogs and served as the sole cataloger for several important catalogs. He has experience with many of the most important collections sold at auction, including the Augsburg collection, the Harry Bass collection, multiple collections of Dr. Stephen Ducker, the Eugene Gardner collection, the Eric P. Newman collection, the Donald P. Patrick collection, 2 Walter Hussek collections, and many, many others. So it's my pleasure to introduce as our first speaker, Mark Borckardt.
Thank you, Lou. I'm going to turn the microphone down. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I've mentioned this a number of times before I really get started here, but John Wright, thank you. 51 years ago, you signed up a 15-year-old young man to EAC membership, and I appreciate it. You changed my life forever, and I'm grateful. So thank you.
Bravo.
So my presentation today might better be called Some Not-So-Famous Boys of 94. I was attempting to narrow down the scope of my talk. Now, keep in mind that Al Boca, on his website, 1794larsons.com, he has nearly 500 biographies of individual collectors of Larsons. And I didn't think we'd have time here to talk about all 500 of them, so I decided on certain parameters. First, the individual is deceased prior to the formation of EAC in 1967. So that narrowed the scope down right there quite a lot. Second, the individual was a collector, not a dealer. Now there are a couple exceptions to that, such as Edward Froissart. Third, biographical information about the person is not commonplace. Again, a couple exceptions. I'll talk a little bit about Howard Newcomb. His biographical information is fairly easy to come by. But for the most part, these are people that you've heard the name, but that might be all you know about them. And the fourth parameter, and this is not inclusive, but ideally, I was able to find a photograph of the individual somewhere. I consulted a number of sources to prepare this talk today. The Newman Numismatic Portal, connected with Washington University in St. Louis. If any of you have not investigated the Newman portal, please do so, because the resource there alone is better than just about any numismatic library you could imagine, maybe with the exception of the ANS and ANA libraries. So I believe, Leanna, is it NNP dot, what's the address for the portal?
It's nnp.wustl.edu.
Or if you can't remember that, just go to Google and type in Newman Numismatic Portal and it'll come up. So the portal, Al Boca's website, 1794larcents.com, John Lupia's Numismatic Mall. Those are all great sources of information. Pete Smith's Study American Numismatic Biographies is instrumental, and that, by the way, is available on the portal. Other sources that I referred to, Ancestry.com, of course, is the #1 genealogical website. There's another site that a lot of people are not aware of, and it might sound kind of morbid, but it's great information, a great source. It's called findagrave.com. It's a wonderful site. Wikipedia, of course, newspapers.com, and a number of other genealogical websites were all accessed for information. Obviously, also commercial websites, pcgs.com, ngccoin.com, goldbergauctions.com, my company's Heritage Auctions, ha.com, stacksbowers.com, pcgs.com. Those are all important sources of information. There's another website that I don't know if it's really been announced yet, but my good friend Ron Guth is working on a website that's going to have a great deal of condition census information. I believe it's called idealcoins.com, if I'm not mistaken. And that's going to be a wonderful site. So, Sheldon 44. This coin was in the Louis Eliasberg collection. Earlier, it was in the collection of a gentleman by the name of Clarence S. Bement. Now, I don't know if that's the proper pronunciation of his last name. I've heard it pronounced Bement, Bement, Bement. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it. But the Chapman sold his collection in 1916. It was Henry Chapman. Bement, not only did he collect coins, but he collected books, he collected minerals, and you see that pink flowery thing, that's actually called, it's a mineral called bementite. And it was actually named for Clarence Bement. He was born in Indiana in 1843, and he died in Philadelphia in 1923. It is said that I believe it was Chase that bought his, J.P. Chase that bought his mineral collection and then donated it to a museum. Apparently it was so extensive it required 2 railroad boxcars to move the mineral collection. So he was pretty avid about that. Coins, I guess, were sort of secondary. Sheldon 71, this coin is in the A&S collection. It was once the property of Robert Donnell Book. Book was a Sewickley, Pennsylvania collector. As you can see, he was born in 1862, died in 1929. He was a banker who died in Ontario, Canada at his summer home. There was a notice in the Pittsburgh Press that indicates he was a one-time cashier of the First National Bank. And in May 1930, and this was right after the stock market crash, George Clapp purchased the Book collection for $20,000, which at that time meant a lot. The collection included 97 cents that were eventually transferred to the A&S. Now, for American Numismatic Association members, they have a e-learning archives, and a lot of this stemmed from the COVID pandemic where people had to give talks online. And one of those talks was Wayne Homran and some fella, what was his name, Chuck something or other, Chuck Heck. And they did a talk on 3 collectors, Robert Book, George Hubbard Clapp, and Charles Clapp. And I borrowed this photograph from their presentation, so thank you.
Looks familiar.
I thought it might. So if you are not an A&M member, please join. Okay, this Sheldon 24 cent, it was in the collections of people like Howard Newcomb and Homer Downing, but before that it was in the collection of M. A. Brown. Now, I don't know a thing about who Brown was. If any of you know, I would like to find out. I tried to figure it out. All we know about him is that the Chapman brothers sold his collection in April 1897. But there was a problem. They created photographic plates for the catalog. And then the Treasury Department came in and said, well, that's counterfeiting. They could not reproduce the photographic plates in the catalog at that time because of Treasury Department regulations. Apparently there were some plates that were later discovered somewhere, and there are reprints known today. But the only thing we know about M.A. Brown, the catalog says that he was from East Northfield, Massachusetts, which is outside of Springfield. The catalog gave him the title of Esquire. Does that mean he was an attorney? Perhaps, not necessarily. And the catalog says the collection of M.A. Brown. It does not say the collection of the late M.A. Brown, so we assume that he was living in 1897. I was not able to find anything else about him, and if any of you want a challenge, go for it. I'm sorry?
The chance it's not even a he.
That's another good point. Mike says the chances are it's not even a he. It could be a she. That's very true. So we don't know. Have a delightful Sheldon 45 that was from the Walter Husak collection. And before that, it was owned by a number of prominent collectors. One of those was Charles Ira Bushnell. He was born somewhere around the year 1820. We don't know exactly. There have been conflicting reports. Some reports say 1812, others say 1826. So we're estimating probably 1820. And he passed away in 1880. Bushnell was a lifelong resident of New York City. He studied law, but he never practiced. He had a collection that Lauren Parmalee purchased for about $8,000 and then consigned duplicates to the Chapman brothers for the Bushnell sale. Sounds like something that Ted Nafscrew might have done. Now, Pete Smith writes that Bushnell was an uncle of the Chapman brothers. That's probably accurate because pretty much everything Pete has done I've found to be extremely accurate, but I haven't been able to verify that. But Bushnell is best remembered for a couple books that he published, one in 1858 called Arrangement of Tradesmen's Cards. So at that time he was studying tokens that were issued by merchants. The American Journal of Numismatics was probably less than complimentary about the Bushnell catalog when they wrote a review of it. They said things like, "We have had little time for studying it, but must confess to a certain disappointment at its contents. Some exception may properly be taken to the expression of opinion so freely volunteered by the compilers. A few funny typographic errors have crept in. We noticed that Harvard has moved down to New Haven. Lot 255 is said to be the earliest medal given to the Indians. This, if a historic fact, is of great interest, and we shall hope for further light concerning it." So, for those people that criticize us as auction catalogers, it's not a new thing. We've all heard it before. Sheldon 65, yes, it's a common variety, but this one's pretty nice. It's in the A&S collection, and previous owner was another one of those people that Chuck and Wayne talked about, Charles Edwin Clapp. He was the brother of George Hubbard Clapp. He was born about 1860 and died about 1940. Apparently, Chuck, am I correct, he sold his collection to his brother,
Yes.
who then donated it to the A&S.
And then first he gave him a few coins to entice him, about 20 some odd, and then he made him pay for the rest.
So pretty smart move.
Smart move that.
Chuck said he gave him about 20 or so cents just to entice him, and then he sold his brother the rest. So. The second finest, Sheldon 62. I don't think he's here at the collection, but this coin was recently in the Mark Cadden collection. Once upon a time, it was owned by this gentleman, Thomas James Clark. Now, Clark never used his first name. It was always T. James Clark. That's what we all know him as. He was born in 1875. He died in 1952. He was a president of the American Numismatic Association for a couple of years in the late 1930s. But he is best known to most of us today for the little pillbox coin holders that he made, the little brown boxes that you put the coin in and you write a little description on the back. Those are very popular with collectors in the middle 1900s, 1950s, 60s. And he's the one that made them. He actually was in the business of producing boxes and paper goods for the drug industry. So he was making little pill boxes, literally. And but he made these boxes for coin collectors that were very popular at the time. On July 21st, 1952, the Buffalo News published an obituary of him. He was the president and founder of the T. James Clark Box and Label Works, internationally known curio collector, and he died following a 4-week illness. I don't know what the illness was. I'm sure a little more investigation we could probably find out. But the obituary said he was a collector of old watches, coins, stamps, and other items. He was a past president of the Chautauqua Coin, Stamp, and Curio Club, which is a curio-us combination. And his business, his company that started out with just a couple of employees grew to over 100 persons by the time he passed away. And I believe that it was purchased by another larger business. But I think if you Google T. James Clark Box Company, you can still find information about it today.
You know, he was one of the first collectors that Sheldon stole coins from. Sheldon cataloged his large cent collection, and he switched out a bunch of them.
Okay, Wendell mentioned he was one of the first people that Dr. Sheldon stole coins from. That's a talk for another day. The late Dan Holmes was the owner of this lovely Sheldon 21 cent. How many of you here did not know Dan Holmes? A few of you. He was an absolutely incredible, gracious gentleman who was a past president of EAC. He came down, what did he, was it Lou Gehrig's disease. At the 2008 EAC in Dallas, he was just starting to show signs of the disease, but I believe that he continued with us for a lot longer than most others with that disease. Was it 2016 maybe that he passed away? Somewhere around there.
I think it was a little before that.
But it was...
Honestly, what we say about Mark and Heritage is that the sale is what kept Dan alive. I think all of us probably have heard that because he made it through all 4 sales. And,
I would like to take credit, but that was the Goldbergs. Goldbergs.
I screwed that one up. Sorry. But that's what kept him alive.
But actually, the sale that we did that I think kept that particular owner alive was Eugene Gardner's 4 sales. But anyway, a former owner of this coin was Thomas Clenay. Again, we're not sure exactly how to pronounce his name. I think it's Clenay. It might be Clenny. I'm not sure. Seems like it ought to be Clenay. But he was from Cincinnati, Ohio. He was born in 1809 in Kentucky, and he died in Cincinnati in 1887. At the time of his death, it said he'd been collecting coins and minerals and other items for more than 40 years, which meant he was actually one of the earliest coin collectors in the country, long before the collecting boom of 1858. Chapman Brothers sold his collection in December 1890, and it was a pretty remarkable collection. But I misspoke. I said minerals. Actually, it was archaeological items from the local area, Native American archaeological items. He donated his archaeological collection to the Cincinnati Art Museum. A 1976 article said that his collection was the largest single source of objects of that type in their museum. But the problem was that at the time of the donation in 1887, according to his will, they did not have the staff to properly catalog and organize it. So it literally sat and sat and sat in boxes in storage until they finally had the staff many, many years later to figure out just what it was. So that was sort of interesting. It was fortunate that Clenet made pretty extensive notes about the items in his collection, including where he acquired some of them. In one case, his notes say that one of his archaeological specimens was acquired from the wild Kentuckian. The Cincinnati Art Museum would like to know who that was, because they have no idea. Another coin from the Dan Holmes collection is this Sheldon 70, and it's gorgeous. Before that, a previous owner, 100 years earlier, more or maybe more, was this fella, Benjamin H. Collins. Born in 1845, he died in 1928. I think it's fair to say that he was a connoisseur of really choice coppers. But he was also a former chief of the tobacco division of the Treasury Department. So even though he was a native of Independence, Missouri, he pretty much spent most all of his adult life in Washington, D.C. From 1894 until about 1926, he actually operated a coin and curio shop in Washington, and he attended a number of early A&A conventions. He was planning to attend the A&A convention in 1928, I believe it was, in Washington, where he lived, but due to a fractured hip 2 years earlier, he was unable to attend, and he died, as I say, in April 1928, so maybe it was 27 when the convention was there. But it says a number of A&A members took occasion to call on him and found him the same genial and companionable Collins of old. So I like to be able to find a little bit of the flavor, if you will, of these individuals. And I think that tells us what he was like. Another A&S coin, Sheldon 29. This coin, once upon a time, was the property of this gentleman, Robert Colton Davis, born in 1823 and died in 1888. Now, this image, Ebenezer Mason, in the, I believe it was the late 1870s, published Mason's Photographic Gallery of Coin Collectors of the United States. And it actually, at that time, he actually provided photographs of 48 different collectors. And he told their name, he told where they lived, and a lot of these people we wouldn't know anything else about if he hadn't published that at that time. So Davis, born in 1823, he died in 1888, and like a number of other early collectors of large cents, he was a Philadelphia pharmacist. He had varied collecting interests. He collected letters and autographs of signers of the Declaration. His main focus in numismatics was pattern coinage, and he actually compiled one of the earliest studies of pattern coins called Pattern and Experimental Issues of the United States, and that was published in the Coin Collector's Journal in the 1800s. He was a member of the Numismatic and Antiquarian Society of Philadelphia. He was a member of the American Philosophical Society. and he served as that organization's curator of numismatics. He did own an 1804 silver dollar. Actually, correction, he owned the same one twice. I think it was C. Doug Smith who said, "You cannot really appreciate a coin until you've owned it 3 times." Well, Davis owned his 1804 dollar just 2 times, so I guess he was not able to appreciate it. New York Coin and Stamps sold the Davis collection in January 1890. Sheldon 25, another coin from the Huzak collection, with a pedigree to Charles Dietz. Here's another person who we really don't know much about. But we know he was born in 1864, he died in 1946, and he lived in Sellersville, Pennsylvania at one point, but he died in Baltimore, Maryland. The numismatist published an obituary in 1946 that told a little bit about him. He was educated at Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire and at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Dietz was a 50-year employee with the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey beginning in 1889, and he was a well-known and accomplished cartographer who became a mentor to many others. His obituary notes many of the leading cartographers, both within and outside the Bureau, owe a great debt to Henry Dietz as a patient instructor, ever willing to impart his knowledge to others and to render all possible professional assistance. So, I mean, he sounds like a guy I wish I had known. Have all of you been back to the back of the Borst room where the exhibits are? Have you seen the exhibit on George Earle? I hope you have, because he once owned this Sheldon 41 that's now in the A&S collection. But George Earle, he assembled an incredible numismatic cabinet that Henry Chapman sold in June 1912. Many of the coins went to John Clapp, no relation to George or Charles Clapp, at least not that I know of.
The gold guy.
The gold and silver guy, whose collection was sold to Louis Eliasberg in 1942. Earle was an attorney, and he was a financier who spent his entire life in Philadelphia, aside from studies at Harvard University. He was born in 1856, he died in 1928, and he and his wife, who he married in 1881, they had 10 children. One of their children was George Howard Earle III, who from 1935 to 1939 served as governor of Pennsylvania. So a pretty well-connected family. Earle was a banker, and he was simultaneously the president of 2 different Philadelphia national banks, including the Market Street National Bank and the Tradesmen's National Bank. And he actually signed bank notes for both banks. So it's probably hard to see here, but he signed this note as president of the Market Street National Bank. So he was an pretty important person. I think it was Tom Webster earlier today. Is Tom in the room? No. I believe Tom told me that Earle had contracted tuberculosis, and he then went to the Adirondacks to get fresh air to try and recover, which he did. And then apparently he established the Adirondacks as a place for the wealthy to go to recover from tuberculosis. So that may be how he made some of his money. Let me know, by the way, how we're doing on time, because I'm.
It's 25-2.
Okay, well we've got we still got like 20 people to go through.
We can stay for another 3 hours, huh?
Well, we got another presentation after this one, so we just
Oh,
want
that's
to.
right, yeah, of course you do.
Yeah.
Right.
There's another room next door.
Okay, another Dan Holmes coin, Sheldon 59. This coin, once upon a time, was the property of a different Colonel Ellsworth than today's Colonel Ellsworth. This one was Colonel James W. Ellsworth, and I'm sure they're probably related somewhere. And if they are, then they're related to my wife, whose grandmother's maiden name was Ellsworth.
There you go.
This one, he was born in Hudson, Ohio on October 13th, 1849. And I mentioned that particular date because that's my birthday. Thank you, John. John asked if my birthday was 1839. No, October 13th, John, thank you.
Well, if it was, and you were 15 when he was.
Yeah, if it was, and I was 15 when you signed me up. When were you born?
You were pretty damn good, Mark.
Ellsworth died in Italy in June 1925. He's another fellow that signed national banknotes as president, I think, because this is signed by James W. Ellsworth, and it's a banknote on Ellsworth, Pennsylvania. I do not know for certain that they are the same people. I think they are. I was told they are, but I have not found proof of that. This is one of the issues of any genealogical study. You have to be able to document everything. Or I think somebody once said that undocumented genealogy is fiction. And it's very true. In 1923, Charles Clapp and Waite Raymond partnered to spend $100,000 to purchase the Colonel Ellsworth collection. Now, what would $100,000 in 1923 buy somebody today? I didn't bother to do the calculation. I'm sure that somebody who has a smartphone in the room could probably figure it out very quickly. So, the photograph, I'm certain, is the proper James Ellsworth. The banknote, I don't know. It may be. I'm actually thinking about doing another project. I've recently started collecting national currency from my hometown in Ohio. And I'm thinking about doing a project where I look up every bank president and bank cashier of every one of the 14,000 national banks that were chartered and see if any of them were members of the ANA. And then doing like a little documentation on those people. I thought that might be kind of fun. That's probably going to be the rest of my life. A really cool set is this Sheldon 19B, head of 1793. Again, this is from the 2024 Hughes collection. I keep showing coins from ANS, Holmes, and Hughes because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, why not?
So a previous owner of this coin was this chap, Dr. George French. I think it was Dr. Sheldon who might have been less than complimentary when he referred to Dr. French. This may not be politically correct, and if it's not, I apologize. But Dr. Sheldon referred to George French as the jolly abortionist. He was a OBGYN from Rochester, New York. Again, born 1865, died in 1932. He was a graduate of the Columbia Medical College in 1888, a one-time president of the Rochester Numismatic Association, and a frequent exhibitor of his large cents at early ANA conventions. How big was his collection? Apparently it numbered like thousands of large cents. he sold his primary collection, his main collection, to BMX Mel in 1929. Then BMX Mel turned around and produced a fixed price list in 1930 where he offered the coins. In one particular instance, George Clapp was a little critical of Mel's cataloging style when he described a coin as having cabinet friction, to which George Clapp annotated, yes, if the cabinet was lined with rocks. So I guess there was a little collecting rivalry going on, perhaps, shall we say. I'm sure these people all liked each other and were all friends, just like we all are today. But, you know, I mean, even today, the boys in 94, there's no rivalry there. You're not trying to outdo each other, are you? Yes, you are. This coin is stunning. Again, from the 2024 Husak auction, I think was this the highest priced coin? I think it was. I think it was the highest priced coin.
Yes.
A dealer friend of mine, actually bought it for inventory because he thought that the price he paid was fair and that he could make a profit. But I believe it was the highest priced coin. I think it sold in the 300,000 range, something like that. A long time ago, long before any of us were around, there was a collector dealer who owned this coin. His name was Edward Froissart, or Froissart. I think it's Froissart is the way I've always heard it pronounced. Life dates 1838 to 1899. His name was properly spelled Edward, E-D-O-U-A-R-D, and there's supposed to be a little thing over the E, but I couldn't find it on my keyboard, so I didn't put it in there. A lot of the records actually had his name Americanized to Edward, but he was born in Switzerland. He served with distinction in the Civil War. I did not know that until I started looking for this information. He was also a language teacher in New York. Irvington on the Hudson, I believe, was his home. And he developed an interest in numismatics about the year 1872. He was a collector, an author, and a dealer. He formed a pretty remarkable collection of 51 high-grade 1794 large cents that he then sold to another numismatist who some of you may have heard of. His name was Garrett. And the father, T. Harrison Garrett, bought the collection. Then it went to Robert Garrett, who sold it to his brother John Work Garrett, who then donated it to the Johns Hopkins University. And they decided it was time to sell the collection. The first sale was Stax in 1976, and then 4 sales by Bowers and Ruddy, 1979 to 1981. And those are classic catalogs of an amazing collection. Pretty nice Sheldon 923, also part of the ANS collection. Once upon a time, the owner of this coin was Ebenezer Gilbert. Now, Gilbert is probably, since I see John Bergner just walking in the room, Gilbert was probably best known for his study of half cents. But he was also a co-author of Variety of United States Cents of 1796 with Thomas Elder. And many of the coins in his collection ended up illustrating the revision of the book on 1794 by Froissart and Hayes. Okay, once again, back to the Mark Cadden collection. This Sheldon 35 is, even though it shows signs of wear, it's one of the finest known, I believe. And a previous owner of this collection was Ferguson Haynes. Now, Haynes was from Maine, Born in 1840, died about 1925. And in the 1900 federal census, he listed his occupation as capitalist. So, I don't, did he have a big ego? Perhaps. He actually operated in Maine a manufacturing concern related to the cotton industry. Now, in Maine and New Hampshire in the 1800s, there were a lot of cotton mills that operated because of the waterfalls in the area. The millwork was very active at that time up in the Northeast. A lot of those buildings still exist. I remember Manchester, New Hampshire has some of the old cotton mill buildings that are just completely vacant and really ought to be torn down, but they don't. Maybe they'll be refurbished. But I wasn't able to find out a lot about Haynes. He was born in Biddeford, Maine, and I believe he lived in Maine pretty much all his life. He had consigned coins in 1880 to S.K. Hartsfeld. He consigned coins in 1888 to the Chapman brothers, and in 1894 to Froissart.
That 35 is also the discovery coin.
Okay, so the S35, Chuck says, was also the discovery coin. Wait a minute, I think I missed somebody. That's not what it's supposed to be. Apparently I'm out of order here, so... Oh, there it is. Okay. Mid-State Sheldon 22 was recently offered by our friends at Stax Bowers. And long ago, it was in the collection of William Wallace Hayes, who is generally known as W. Hayes, but it was William Wallace. And again, 1821 to 1899. He was a collector of coins, stamps, autographs, and old china. So, old china in the 1800s is really old china today. He was born in Pennsylvania and he died in Washington, D.C. And he was an employee of the pension office. Hayes was a co-author of Varieties of United States Cents of the year 1794 that was published in 1893. And Ed Froissart was his co-author, and that book became the standard reference for many years. Hayes had a habit of taking some white ink and in very tiny letters, he would actually put white ink Hayes, or actually Maris, attribution numbers on the edge of his 1794 large cents. Who's going to do that today? Probably none of us. But today, when you find a 1794 large cent that has white ink Maris numbers on the edge, that's historically important. There was a similar situation in the early 1900s with many colonials where collectors would take India ink and pen the variety on usually the obverse of the coin. And again, that does not affect the value, that enhances the value. Those are highly important today. Sheldon 28 from the Adam Mervis collection was previously owned by Henry Clay Hines. Now the Prosky Hines Sheldon pedigree is very famous in large cent collecting. So Henry Clay Hines from New Jersey was one of the three. lived to the age of 90 from 1856 to 1946. He earned a law degree from Columbia University. He was admitted to the bar in 1883. And after a very short period practicing law, which apparently did not agree with him, he switched careers and became a manufacturer of men's clothing. He was also involved in politics, but it is said that his honesty was considered political suicide. So apparently he did not have a successful political career because he was too honest. All right, I think we're running out of time here. I've spent a little bit too much time on each person, so real quickly, Sheldon 48, the famous starred reverse, was once owned by Allison Jackman. He was from New York, 1849 to 1917. Most people did not even know that he collected coins until it was reported after his death. Sheldon 1788 was owned by, I think, a very fascinating character, one I really would have liked to have known, this fella, John Story Jenks. I guess it was Henry Chapman that sold his collection in 1921. It was so extensive, there were 7,300 auction lots in the catalog. It required 42 photographic plates, and it took 10 days to conduct the auction. Sheldon 31. Let me skip ahead here. Where did I go? I keep missing pages here. Oh, there we go. Sheldon 31 from the Alboca collection. It was previously owned by William Jenks, 1822 to 1904. He was a Philadelphia pharmacist again, and he was a first cousin of the previous gentleman, John Story Jenks. And that was something I did not know until I started investigating. All right, let's go ahead to, we're going to jump ahead, go past Foster and Larder to the Sheldon 30 from the Huzak auction. There was once owned, who was the Quaker physician? Anybody?
Dr. Maris.
Dr. Edward Maris. 1832 to 1900, and all his life he continued the Quaker style of these and thous and those, and he was president of, actually his father was president of the Delaware County Bank, but he was a very talented physician, a student of New Jersey coppers, as well as the early large cents. Okay, let's see, who do we have next? One of the amazing coins among 1794 large cents is red and brown missing fraction bar that was once owned by Henry Clay Miller. I didn't think I would find a photo of him, but I managed to dig it up. Miller is best known for his groundbreaking work on Connecticut copper varieties, and yet today we still use the Miller numbers for attribution. Okay, we're going to skip over Howard Brown's Newcomb because everybody knows about him. We'll jump ahead to Sheldon 60 that was once owned by this gentleman, Loren Parmalee. He was like the forerunner of Ted Nafsker. The late Ted Nafsker was known to buy entire collections, pull out the coins he wanted, and then sell the balance under the name of the original collector. And he did that with several different collections. Well, he got the idea apparently from Loren Parmalee, who did the same thing in the 1800s. Parmalee bought the Seavey collection, he bought the Bushnell collection, he cherry-picked them for his own collection, and he sold the rest under the names of the original collectors. So the late Nafsker was, he borrowed the idea. Okay, we're going to jump ahead to Thomas Warner, 1831 to 1890. Again, another photo I didn't think I would find, but this was posted on a Ancestry.com family tree. So that's where the photo came from. Warner, 1831 to 1890. The 1870 federal census says that he was a lumberman. But it also mentioned that he valued his real estate at $90,000 in 1870, and that his personal estate was valued at $35,000. So he obviously had the means to form a pretty special collection. And finally, we're going to jump ahead. How are we doing on time, Chuck?
2 minutes.
Perfect. We're going to jump ahead to the last guy. After I straighten up my paperwork, we're going to go.
This is fabulous.
We're going to go past Wooden, and we're going to go to. Well, let's finish with this guy. This not the last guy, almost the last guy. If I can find out where that page went. This Sheldon 63, it's the so-called Fallen 4 variety. I think that it should really be called the High 9 variety, but that's just my personal opinion. There we go. This coin, again, from the Huzak collection, the 2024 Huzak collection. It was previously owned by Captain Andrew Zabriskie. And we'll finish with Zabriskie, 1853 to 1916. He was a member of the New York National Guard who served until 1898. He was the 10th president of the American Numismatic Society until 1905. And Henry Chapman sold his collection in June 1909. And with that, I imagine we're out of time.
I'm really disappointed, Mark. I came here solely to learn how to pronounce Clenny and Bement.
I believe that you would need a time machine, Dane, to go back to the 1880s, and then you can come back and tell us all.
But I'm glad I came. Thank you.
Go find the relatives that are still living.
Some of those photos that you had, I've never seen them before, and that's
I hadn't either.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
I would like to call this part 1 of Mark's presentation, and we're going to have a part 2 maybe next year if he's willing to do it. I mean, I found it absolutely fascinating, and he has a lot more material.
Yeah.
Apparently, I'll be back next year.
That means
So
you-
that's how you get people to talk. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing the research and finding out all the information. It was a lot of fun. So.
Thank you.